The grand celestial court shimmered with bioluminescent splendor as representatives from 47 star systems gathered for the most anticipated event of the century. Princess Deborah of the Andromeda Coalition stood at the center of the crystalline platform, her elegant gown reflecting the ambient light of 1,000 distant suns. This was the selection ceremony, an ancient tradition where the most powerful empires sought alliances through matrimonial bonds. Deborah's father, Emperor Valkshan, watched from his throne with calculating eyes. His daughter was his greatest political asset, a beautiful and intelligent young woman whose hand in marriage could secure treaties, resources, and military pacts that would elevate their coalition to unprecedented heights. The suitors had traveled from across the galaxy, each more impressive than the last. First came Prince Zoradh of the Krillian Empire, his four arms crossed in regal dignity. His species had conquered 12 solar systems through superior military might. He approached Deborah, his multifaceted eyes scanning her with cold assessment. After a moment of silence, he turned away without a word. Insufficient strategic value. His translator echoed across the hall. Deborah's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. This was politics, not romance. She had prepared herself for this reality since childhood. Next approached Prince Veldan of the Aqueous Collective, his translucent form rippling with bioluminescent patterns. His civilization controlled the galaxy's most abundant water worlds and possessed technology that could terraform planets within decades. He circled Deborah once, twice, then bowed respectfully. Your beauty is undeniable, princess, but your empire lacks the aquatic resources my people require for expansion. He departed gracefully, leaving Deborah standing alone once more. One by one, they came. The insectoid Prince Thexlar, whose hive mind controlled 3 nebulae. The crystalline Duke Charlon, whose people lived for millennia and considered all short-lived species beneath them. The telepathic Lord Mindar, who probed her thoughts and found them too primitive for meaningful communion. Each rejection cut deeper than the last, though Deborah refused to show weakness. She was a princess, trained in diplomacy and statecraft. Yet beneath the political facade, she was still young, still vulnerable to the sting of being measured and found wanting by beings who saw her as nothing more than a commodity. Her father's expression grew darker with each departure. The coalition's standing in the galactic community was at stake. Without a powerful alliance, they would remain a minor player, vulnerable to the ambitions of larger empires. Then Kenneth stepped forward. The crowd fell silent, but not with anticipation, with confusion and barely concealed contempt. A human? From that backwards world called Earth? The species that had barely achieved faster than light travel a generation ago. The beings whose lifespans were laughably short, whose technology was primitive, whose single planet hadn't even unified under one government. Kenneth wore no royal robes, no ceremonial armor. He dressed in a simple black suit, a human custom that looked absurdly plain among the exotic attire of galactic nobility. He stood perhaps 6 feet tall, average by human standards, but unremarkable compared to the towering or massive forms of other species present. His brown hair was neatly trimmed, his blue eyes clear and steady. Emperor Valkshan leaned forward. Human, this ceremony is for recognized powers only. Your presence here is irregular. With respect, Your Majesty, Kenneth replied in flawless galactic standard. I hold diplomatic credentials from the Earth Coalition. We may be new to the galactic stage, but we are recognized members of the Assembly. Recognition and relevance are different matters, sneered Ambassador Croth, a serpentine creature from the hegemony. What could Earth possibly offer that the great empires cannot? Kenneth turned to face Deborah directly, ignoring the political theater around them. For the first time that evening, someone looked at her not as a political asset, but as a person. I can't offer you 12 conquered systems, Kenneth said quietly, his voice somehow carrying across the hall. I can't offer you ancient technology or immortality or telepathic networks. I can't even guarantee that my species will survive the next 1,000 years. We're too young, too reckless, too prone to fighting among ourselves. The crowd murmured with derision. This was going exactly as they expected. But, Kenneth continued, his gaze never leaving Deborah's eyes, I can offer you something none of them can. A choice. Deborah blinked, caught off guard. A choice. Every person who approached you tonight saw an asset. A treaty, a resource to be acquired or rejected based on strategic calculations. I'm not here to evaluate your worth to my species' expansion or my planet's security. He took a step closer. I'm here because I spent the last 3 months studying your speeches at the Galactic Assembly. I read your proposals for refugee resettlement from the Outer Rim conflicts. I watched you argue for protections for pre-spaceflight civilizations against exploitation. He paused, letting his words sink in. You're brilliant, compassionate, and brave enough to challenge the status quo even when it's politically dangerous. Those qualities don't show up on strategic assessment reports, but they matter more than all the fleets and resources in the galaxy. The hall had gone completely silent. This was unprecedented, scandalous, absurd. I'm not asking you to marry me tonight, Kenneth continued. I'm not asking you to choose between your duty and your dignity. I'm just asking if you'd like to talk, as equals, not as political instruments. If you decide you want nothing to do with Earth or humans, I'll respect that completely. But if you decide you'd like to know more about the species that still believes in things like individual choice and personal freedom, even in marriages, he smiled slightly. Well, we've got a lot to talk about. Emperor Valkshan started to rise, his face darkening with anger. This is an outrage. Father, wait. Deborah's voice cut through the tension. She stepped down from the platform, moving past the space where princes and lords had rejected her. She walked directly to Kenneth and extended her hand in the human custom she'd studied but never used. I would like to talk, she said clearly, her voice steady and sure. Not as a princess to a suitor, but as Deborah to Kenneth. He took her hand gently, shaking it once. That works for me. The celestial court erupted in chaos. Outrage from some, laughter from others, shocked silence from most. But Kenneth and Deborah barely noticed. They were already deep in conversation, walking toward the garden terrace, discussing Earth's oceans and Andromeda's moons, art and music and philosophy. Behind them, Emperor Valkshan watched with a mixture of fury and grudging curiosity. His daughter had just rejected the greatest powers in the galaxy to speak with a human. It was political suicide. Or perhaps, he thought, watching how Deborah smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in years, it was something else entirely. Humanity had just announced itself on the galactic stage not with weapons or wealth, but with something far more dangerous. The radical idea that people mattered more than power, and the galaxy would never be quite the same.